Game development explained. No theory, just what works.
What if I told you that the absolute worst thing you can do for a failing, completely chaotic project is to actually try and fix it?
Right, yeah.
Like that grand sweeping process overhaul that your boss just proudly announced in some mandatory all-hands meeting. It's actually statistically guaranteed to make your team miss their deadlines even harder.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like complete corporate heresy, but when a system is already buckling under extreme stress, injecting this massive, complex, solution into the mix is often the exact thing that finally snaps the camel's back.
Oh, totally.
You're basically just introducing a secondary crisis of process on top of your existing crisis of production.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are talking directly to you today, our listener, the learner. We know your profile perfectly. You are someone who, wants to stay deeply informed. You crave those critical, actionable insights, but you absolutely do not want to drown in a sea of information overload or buzzwords or abstract management theories. And you've handed over a fascinating, highly focused document today. And honestly, it completely flips the script on how we manage chaotic projects.
Yeah, the document is this single laser-focused brief titled 260306 Kaizen.doclex. And it really strips away all the usual fluff that gets associated with business philosophy.
Yeah, I guess.
It turns it into this ruthless survival guide, specifically engineered for the notoriously unpredictable world of game development.
So our mission for this deep dive is to take this often completely misunderstood Japanese concept of Kaizen and really look at how this source document weaponizes it. Right. We're going to explore how it completely debunks the myth of grand process upgrades, how it defines this ridiculously practical, almost uncomfortably small unit of change, and how it applies these tiny micro-standards across the most chaotic production loops.
Things like tracking down software bugs or managing hidden dependencies.
Right, handling risk, and even taming the incredibly murky waters of creative design iteration.
Yeah, and the baseline we need to establish before we even look at the mechanics is that the goal of this document isn't to add another layer of jargon to your plate.
Please, no more jargon.
Right. It's not asking you to memorize some new agile framework. It is fundamentally about systematically isolating and removing the friction that actually causes professional burnout. I mean, it frames process not as a rule book, but as a defense mechanism against chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly grasp how this hyper-focused version of Kaizen fixes things, we first need to look at how studios typically try and just spectacularly fail to solve their production nightmares.
Yeah.
So the document starts by defining Kaizen. In a literal translation, it means change for the better. But philosophically, it's built on the belief that massive structural results actually come from the sum of hundreds of microscopic daily improvements made by the people actually doing the work.
Right, and the source immediately draws a sharp contrast between that philosophy of, microscopic daily change and how game production usually operates.
Oh, completely.
Because game production, and frankly any high-stakes software development, it magnetically attracts what the text calls big moves. Management sees chaos, and their immediate instinct is to regain control through this sweeping, dramatic gesture.
We've all lived through the big moves. It's a new suite of tracking tools or a completely different layout for the morning stand-up meetings.
Oh, or the classic, a massive new operating model announced via a 70-slide deck.
Yes, in a mandatory meeting that literally nobody had the free time to attend in the first place.
Exactly. And the intent behind those big moves is usually pure, right? Leadership isn't trying to torture the team.
No, of course not.
They see the chaos, they see the missed deadlines, and they just desperately want to stop paying what the document brilliantly calls the rework tax.
Oh, rework tax, yeah.
Right, that massive cost of doing the exact same job twice because it wasn't done right the first time. So they want predictability, they want a clean slate. Broken system yesterday, pristine new system today.
But then reality just kicks the door down. I mean, the text paints this visceral picture of what that reality looks like in the trenches, like a major project milestone slips by 2 weeks.
Right.
Or a new build of the game goes totally unstable and just keeps crashing. Or an external partner suddenly needs an urgent hotfix, which is, a panicked emergency patch sent out immediately to stop the game from breaking on the user's end.
Yeah.
Or a senior engineer just puts in their 2 weeks notice.
And when that level of pressure hits, that grand process upgrade doesn't save the team. It becomes an anchor.
Yeah.
It becomes just another heavy, cumbersome thing they have to maintain while trying to literally put out a fire. What's fascinating here is that you see this constantly. Management loves the big move because it offers psychological comfort.
Feels like you're doing something.
Exactly. It feels decisive. It looks fantastic on a quarterly review slide deck. It gives the illusion that you are taking control of the chaos. But complex, sweeping systems, they require ideal conditions to function.
Right.
They require everyone to be well-rested, highly communicative, and strictly adhering to the new rules. An unstable build destroys ideal conditions instantly.
I always think of it like buying a massive, complex piece of home gym equipment.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
You know, the ones, I mean, they have the pulleys, the hydraulic levers, digital screens tracking your heart rate. It looks amazing in the glossy brochure. And you tell yourself, this is it. This is my new comprehensive fitness operating model.
Yes, the new operating model for your living room.
Right. But then you come home from work on a Tuesday and you are absolutely exhausted. You don't use it. You don't have the mental energy to set up the pulleys. It just becomes a very expensive, very complicated clothing rack.
Yeah.
You revert to what's easiest. Maybe you do a few push-ups, or maybe you just sit on the couch. And in a stress studio, the source says teams revert to ad hoc decisions, emergency phone calls, and temporary fixes that live purely in memory.
Well, the cognitive load of a crisis completely overrides the cognitive load required to follow a new process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When a milestone slips, every ounce of the team's mental energy redirects to raw survival. The grand process upgrade usually requires people to hold a lot of new, unnatural behaviors in their heads all at once.
Right, like tagging a ticket with a specific new prefix.
Exactly, or running it through a new 3-step approval gate and logging their hours in some new portal. When the servers are melting down, survival instinct just takes over. The fastest path to a solution is picking up the phone, calling the one engineer you know can fix it, and bypassing the tracking board entirely.
Just skip the system.
Right. The fix gets made, but it lives only in the memories of the two people on that call. The grand system is completely abandoned.
But hold on, let's explore that survival instinct a bit. Because if the intent of the big move is specifically to reduce the chaos and stop the team from paying this rework tax, why does it instantly shatter the second a partner needs that hot fix? I mean, are we saying people are just inherently bad at following rules the minute they get stressed?
No. People aren't bad at following rules. They're highly rational actors trying to minimize immediate pain. Okay, the source highlights that grand process changes fail because they demand a high upfront cognitive investment for a delayed, purely theoretical payoff. When your hair is on fire, you don't read the instruction manual for the fire extinguisher to ensure you're holding it at the optimal ergonomic angle.
Right, you just spray it.
Exactly. You just
Wow.
spray it. The problem is when everyone bypasses the system to spray their individual fire extinguishers, nobody knows what changes were actually made to the game's code.
Right.
You survive Tuesday, but you guarantee that Wednesday is going to be a disaster because the system state is now a complete mystery.
Wow, yeah. So sweeping changes collapse under the weight of a slipped milestone. If the giant, shiny new operating model isn't the answer, what actually survives the chaos?
Right.
The document proposes a totally different scale of change. It takes Kaizen out of the realm of, vague continuous improvement slogans that HR puts on a break room poster and redefines it as a hard, non-negotiable studio reality.
Yeah. The source defines a Kaizen unit very precisely. It calls it, quote, small, intentional upgrades to how work happens, shipped consistently, and reviewed like any other production deliverable.
Reviewed like any other production deliverable.
Yeah.
That wording is incredibly deliberate.
Extremely.
It takes the concept of improving our process out of the abstract and puts it right next to designing a character model or writing a physics engine. It's not a side hobby for the management team.
Yeah.
It is actual trackable work.
It forces accountability, and the document outlines a very specific loop for this. It starts with spotting friction. It gives these concrete, painful examples that anyone in software will immediately recognize.
Like what?
Like a feature that constantly bounces back and forth between the design team and the engineering team because nobody agrees on how it should actually work.
Oh, classic.
Or QA, the quality assurance testers, continually reopening the exact same category of collision bugs because the root cause was never fixed. Or meetings that start with 4 essential people, bloat to 14 attendees over a month, and end with absolutely 0 decisions being made.
Ugh, the dreaded bloat meeting. I mean, the friction there is palpable. You can practically feel your soul leaving your body as the calendar invite pops up.
Yeah, exactly.
So Kaizen treats that specific visceral friction as raw data. It's the fuel for the engine. And this brings us to the core constraint of the document. Kaizen is defined as one small improvement per cycle that removes a recurring source of rework or decision drift.
Yeah, and the constraints the text places on this are intentionally ruthless. You pick 1 improvement.
Just one.
Just 1. You are allowed up to 3 only if you have a highly mature team, incredibly strong ownership, and actual slack in your schedule, which, let's face it, almost no one has during actual production. Yeah. And you must time box this improvement to your existing cycle. Whether you work in 2-week sprints or monthly milestone phases, the rule is absolute. If the improvement cannot be fully implemented in one cycle, it is not Kaizen. It is a massive project masquerading as a quick fix, and you shouldn't do it.
To help teams figure out what that one thing should be, the document provides this incredible anchor question. It asks, what would make the next iteration slightly less painful than the last?
The psychology of that question is just brilliant. It forcefully steers teams away from looking outward at abstract industry best practices, because best practices are very often solutions out looking for a problem.
Right.
This question grounds the team entirely in their own context. It focuses on the concrete, localized pain they're feeling right at this exact moment. It lowers the bar from how do we achieve perfect efficiency to how do we make next Tuesday suck 5% less.
I love that. Make next Tuesday suck 5% less.
I really love the focus on localized pain, but I have to push back here for a second because this sounds a bit naive if you're in the thick of a truly failing project.
Okay.
The source is incredibly strict about this constraint, pick 1 improvement. But if I'm a producer and my house is literally on fire, my documentation is a mess, the game takes 4 hours to compile a build, test coverage is non-existent, and half my senior staff is interviewing at other studios.
Right, a total meltdown.
Yeah. Isn't fixing just 1 tiny thing going to feel like using a water pistol on a raging forest fire?
It absolutely feels counterintuitive when you are drowning. Your instinct is to thrash around and try to fix everything at once. But the text directly addresses this impulse. It warns, if you choose 10 improvements, you usually ship none.
Yeah.
Let's look at your forest fire analogy. If you try to rewrite the documentation, overhaul the build pipeline, change the testing protocols, and restructure your retention policy all in the same 2 weeks, while the team is actively crunching to hit a milestone, you aren't putting out the fire.
No, you are just throwing more highly combustible process onto the flames. You paralyze the team with new rules when they are already exhausted.
So by trying to fix everything, I'm actually guaranteeing that nothing gets fixed, and I'm probably annoying my engineers even more.
Precisely. Limiting the scope to a single Kaizen unit does something incredibly vital that sweeping changes never do. It builds systemic trust.
Trust, okay.
It proves to a cynical, burnt-out team that change is actually possible. When you fix just 1 tiny thing, say, you automate a script that shaves 10 minutes off the daily build time, and that script actually works day after day, the team feels a tiny, genuine moment of relief.
They actually see it working.
Exactly. It proves that you can improve the environment while still shipping the game. Think of Kaizen not like a water pistol, but like compound interest. A 1% improvement doesn't look like much on day 1, but applied consistently every single cycle, it aggressively curves upward, clearing out the structural debt without stopping the assembly line.
Compound interest for studio culture. That makes a lot of sense. So we have our unit of change. 1 small, highly constrained upgrade per cycle. But a unit of change is useless if we don't have a delivery mechanism, right?
Right.
Where do we actually insert this upgrade so it doesn't just become yet another mandatory meeting you, the listener, have to suffer through? And the brilliance of the next section is that we don't build a new delivery mechanism at all. We hijack the ones we already have.
Yeah, the source is adamant on this point. Do not introduce new ceremonies to manage Kaizen.
No new meetings.
Exactly. Kaizen works best where pain repeats and where a conversational cadence already exists on the calendar. You attach this tiny unit of change to the surfaces of production that the team is already interacting with.
So you graft it onto things like sprint planning or milestone reviews, the daily bug triage. You attach it to cross-discipline handoffs where, like, the art team passes assets to the engineering team.
Yeah, or play tests and release prep. But the absolute prime target the document identifies for hijacking is the retro.
The retrospective, yeah.
Yeah.
And for anyone unfamiliar, a retro is a meeting held at the end of a work cycle to discuss what went well and what didn't.
Right. And the source points out a deeply consistent, almost universal failure pattern with how studios run these meetings.
Oh, yeah.
The retro morphs into a pure emotional venting session. People get in a room, they feel heard, they share their frustration. Everyone nods, maybe management offers a few heavy sighs of solidarity, and then the hour is up.
Right.
They all go back to their desks, and absolutely nothing changes about the system that caused the frustration in the first place.
It's exactly like a group therapy session where everyone gathers to complain about a massive hole in the roof.
Yes.
Everyone sits in a circle while it's actively raining on them, saying, wow, this roof is terrible. I'm soaking wet. It's really impacting my ability to type.
And everyone validates each other.
Right. I hear you. You are so valid in your wetness. Your feelings are seen. They feel great getting it off their chests. And then the meeting ends and they all go right back to sitting under the giant hole in the roof.
The emotional release tricks the brain into feeling like work was accomplished. The reason the standard retro fails is a complete lack of concrete output discipline.
Yeah.
To fix this, the source demands a rigid 4-part format for the conversation. Keep, drop, try, and learn.
Okay, let's break those down because the mechanics here are crucial. Keep is identifying what actually helped this past cycle and cementing it as a standard moving forward.
Right.
Drop is identifying what actively hurt the team and making a hard agreement to just stop doing it. Try is the absolute core of the Kaizen philosophy. It is the one experiment you are going to run for the next cycle, treated as a trackable deliverable.
Yes.
And learn is defining exactly what metrics or behaviors you are going to observe to judge if the experiment actually work.
And framing that third step as a try, an experiment, is a massive psychological shift.
How so?
Well, the text explicitly advises framing these changes as system improvement. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the goal is to remove friction, not to assign personal blame.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. When a producer says, we are going to try this one small change to our handoff system, it completely removes the psychological threat response from the room. It's no longer, Dave is constantly messing up his asset handoffs and ruining my week.
Poor Dave.
Right, poor Dave. Instead, it becomes the structure of our handoff system is causing friction. Let's run an experiment to see if this tweak makes it smoother for everyone.
But the document is incredibly clear that this psychological safety net only works if you enforce strict output discipline. It says you must select one improvement, you must assign a specific human being as the owner of that improvement, and you must define a hard check-back date.
Yes.
Without an owner and a date, you are just running the leaky roof support group again.
Exactly. The phrasing treat try as a deliverable is the linchpin here. If a 3D environment artist has a scheduled deliverable to finish the textures for a rock formation by Friday, the Kaizen owner has an equally weighted deliverable to implement the new ticket tagging experiment by Friday.
They live on the same board.
They hold the exact same weight.
So, the retro successfully generates the try experiment. The team agrees on a tiny change. But how do we ensure that experiment actually survives contact with the day-to-day workflow? I mean, how do we keep people from instantly forgetting the new rule the minute an unstable build drops and panic sets in?
Right.
This is where the source introduces a concept to permanently kill the massive, dusty corporate rulebook.
The document calls them micro-standards. The text observes that when studios try to standardize processes, their default move is to write big documentation. Right? They build a massive 50-page internal wiki page titled How We Make Games at This Studio.
Which is a document that absolutely no one has ever read to the end.
Nobody reads it.
No.
It is functionally impossible to keep updated as the project actually evolves. And under the pressure of a looming deadline, it is completely ignored.
Totally.
The Kaizen solution flips this. A microstandard is a tiny localized pattern that a developer can follow without needing to context switch or read a manual. It lives directly inside the workflow, right where the work is actively happening.
The examples the document provides for this are so beautifully grounded. Let's look at the cross-discipline handoff package.
Yeah, that's a great one.
When a designer needs to hand a feature over to an engineer, things usually get lost in translation. But instead of writing a 10-page design document, the microstandard is just a template pasted right at the top of the task ticket. It contains 5 rapid-fire bullet points: purpose, current state, constraints, dependencies, and open questions. That's it.
And let's look at the mechanics of why those 5 points, particularly constraints, are so vital.
Okay.
If a 3D artist hands off an incredibly detailed rock model to a rigger without listing the constraints, the rigger might spend 3 days setting it up, only to find out that the rock has 100,000 polygons and completely crashes the game engine's memory budget.
Oh, man. 3 days wasted.
Exactly. The constraint memory budget is 5,000 polygons was missing. By forcing the artist to fill out the word constraints right in the ticket before they can hit submit, you eliminate a 3-day delay and a massive interpersonal conflict, all with a single prompt.
Another brilliant example is the required decision write-up after a call. I mean, we've all been on a 45-minute call where a major design pivot is decided, and then everyone hangs up and vaguely remembers a slightly different version of what was agreed upon.
Oh, every time.
Right. Instead of assigning someone to type up an exhaustive transcript of the meeting, the microstandard requires a 5-line summary dropped into the chat. The decision, the rationale behind it, the scope boundaries, who owns the next step, and what that step is.
Or consider adjustments to the definition of done.
Right.
In software, definition of done is a checklist a task must pass before it's considered complete.
Right.
Instead of overhauling the whole checklist, a Kaizen approach just adds one tiny microstandard line based on a recent failure. For instance, if a build broke because text was missing, you just add localization keys present. If the game keeps stuttering, you add performance budget checked.
I really love this phrasing prompt the source gives to figure out these microstandards. It asks, if we keep paying the same cost, add one small line to present it. It completely shifts the burden of memory. You aren't asking an exhausted developer to memorize a new 50-page operating model. You're just putting a tiny, impossible-to-miss checklist right in front of their eyes at the exact second they're about to do the work.
Right. It relies on designing the environment to prompt the correct action rather than relying on human willpower or pristine memory under stress. It is essentially systems design applied to human behavior.
Okay, let's inject a little reality check here.
Sure.
The text goes on to talk about applying Kaizen to a team's overarching flow. It says that before you can improve, you have to write down your actual work model.
Right.
Like, how does work enter the pipeline? How is it prioritized? Who validates it? Where are the quality gates? It tells you to map this out, name 2 helpful things, 2 hurtful things, and upgrade 1 hurtful thing.
Yes.
But the text also points out that teams constantly hide behind industry labels like Scrum or Kanban, which, for the uninitiated, are just very popular formalized project management frameworks.
Right.
If a team is already proudly claiming, we do Scrum by the book, aren't they going to fiercely resist sitting down and writing out their actual flow on a wiki page?
Yeah.
Isn't this just fighting exhausting process with more exhausting process?
It's a very natural reaction to view this as busy work, but the text is making a vital distinction here. Kaizen demands absolute honesty over labels.
Honesty over labels.
Yes, hiding behind a label like Scrum is often a defense mechanism. A team might hold a 15-minute daily stand-up meeting and call it Scrum, but behind the scenes, tasks are being assigned via secret Slack messages.
Priorities change based on who yells the loudest.
Exactly. And quality gates are entirely ignored just to hit Friday deadlines. By forcing the team to write down their actual behavioral flow, not what the Scrum handbook dictates, but how the sausage is actually made on a Tuesday afternoon, you ground the improvement in stark reality.
Yeah.
If you don't map out the invisible, messy reality, you end up blindly adopting a framework designed for a different company, completely ignoring your own local constraints.
Wow. Okay. You can't fix a map if you refuse to admit you're standing in a swamp.
Exactly.
So microstandards are fantastic for untangling an individual developer's flow, or maybe a small pod of 3 people. But modern game development, or really any major tech initiative, is a massive, tangled web of highly interconnected parts.
Yeah, very much so.
What happens when your beautiful, highly optimized, localized flow slams into a brick wall because you were sitting on your hands waiting for the audio department to finish the sound effect?
Right.
That leads us to the most dangerous word in production and how Kaizen diffuses it.
Dependencies. Sectioning off dependency pane is one of the highest leverage places to apply a Kaizen unit.
Okay.
The source makes a profound observation here. In most failing projects, the core issue isn't that dependencies you can't build a complex product without them. The fatal flaw is a lack of visibility. As the document clearly states, dependencies exist entirely in people's heads. The schedule assumes they will resolve somehow.
Somehow.
Yeah.
It really is the most toxic word you can use when scheduling a multi-million-dollar project.
It is the enemy of engineering. Because these dependencies only exist as vague anxieties in an individual's mind, they inevitably lead to late discovery.
Yeah.
The art team doesn't deliver the model on Friday. The engineering team acts completely blindsided on Monday. A massive panic ensues, and the milestone slips.
And the Kaizen upgrade for this is almost frustratingly simple. It argues you just need to make dependencies visible in one place for one specific slice of work.
Right.
You map out what must happen sequentially, serial work. You map out what can be done at the same time, parallel work. You identify what is actively blocking progress. And crucially, you assign a name to who owns that block.
Yeah.
The document suggests a tiny micro standard, like adding a single drop-down field in your ticket tracking software labeled blocking versus non-blocking,
Right.
or adding one required line to the description. If this slips, what breaks?
That specific question, if this slips, what breaks, is a forcing function. It forces a producer to run a mental simulation of the future. It rips the dependency out of the realm of abstract scheduling software and grounds it in concrete reality. If the lighting engine slips by 2 days, what breaks?
Well, the cinematic team can't record the cutscenes.
Right. And that means the voice actors can't sync their audio. Suddenly, a 2-day slip in lighting delays 3 different departments for a week.
And the document applies this exact same philosophy of visibility to how we handle project risk. It draws a very hard, very necessary line between having a dead risk register and cultivating a living risk log.
The distinction is critical. Most corporations require a risk register.
Yeah.
It's a spreadsheet created at the start of a project filled with theoretical disasters, presented to the executives exactly once, and then buried in a folder on the server, never to be opened again until the post-mortem meeting where everyone points fingers.
It's pure compliance theater.
Completely.
Let me use an analogy here. A dead risk register is like a fire extinguisher that is locked inside a glass case down in the unlit basement behind a door with a rusted handle. Technically, you check the OSHA compliance box. You legally possess an extinguisher. But a living risk log, that is taking the fire extinguisher and sitting it right on the kitchen counter while you are actively deep frying a frozen turkey.
That's brilliant.
Right. It is right there, fully contextualized, completely visible, and ready to be deployed the second the oil bubbles over.
This raises an important question, right? What is the actual difference between simply having risks and actively managing risks? The difference is entirely about enforcing a predictable review moment.
Yeah.
A living risk log keeps the list of risks incredibly short, only the things that could actually sink the ship this month. It keeps them current, and it forces the team to review them on a strict, predictable cadence.
And the requirements, the text lists for a living risk log are tight, no-nonsense micro-standards. You list what could go wrong. You define the early notice, like how you will know it's starting to go wrong before it's too late. You define the reaction plan. You assign one owner, and you set a review moment. That early notice metric is the game changer. It's the difference between actively steering away from an iceberg and just writing a really accurate obituary for the ship after it sinks.
And again, applying Kaizen to this doesn't mean building a new department of risk management. The document suggests an impossibly tiny improvement: add an owner per dependency.
It seems almost too small.
It seems so small it borders on trivial. But in the chaos of production, assigning a specific human name to a dependency radically alters behavior. If Sarah knows she is the sole owner of the physics dependency for the new vehicle system, she is naturally going to track its progress.
Because her name is on it.
Exactly. If it's just a vague note floating in the software, the bystander effect takes over. No one tracks it, assuming someone else will, until it crashes the entire build.
Okay, so we've tackled the highly structural left brain side of production. We talked about how to hunt bugs, map dependencies, and pull risks out of the basement. But this next section is where the document makes what I consider a genuinely radical claim. It argues that Kaizen, this highly structured, systematic approach to friction, can actually be applied to the most subjective, squishy, fiercely defended part of game development, the creative design process.
Yes, the section on taming design drift. The text readily acknowledges the industry mythology surrounding design.
Oh, so much mythology.
Right. Design iteration is widely viewed as pure, unadulterated creative work that fundamentally resists structure. There is a deeply held belief that if you put process on creative ideation, You kill the magic. You stifle the art.
Yeah.
The source completely strips that mythology away. It argues, in practice, design iteration is a loop like any other that has inputs, it has outputs, and crucially, it has very predictable failure modes.
And the major catastrophic failure mode it identifies is design drift. Let's build a scenario to explain exactly how this happens. Imagine you are building a platforming game, like Mario. The core mechanic is the jump. In week 1, the lead designer decides the jump feels too floaty, so they increase gravity by 10%. In week 2, a level designer complains they can't make a certain gap, so an engineer tweaks the character's forward momentum.
Right.
In week 3, an animator changes the hang time of the animation to make it look cooler, which accidentally alters the collision hitboxes. By week 4, the jump feels completely broken, the game is unplayable, and absolutely no one wrote down why any of those tiny changes were made or what specific player problem they were supposed to solve.
That is textbook design drift. When you realize the game feels wrong, reverting the changes becomes pure guesswork because the original intent has completely evaporated.
You're just blindly turning dials, hoping the magic comes back.
Exactly. The Kaizen move to fix this isn't to stop people from tweaking the jump. It's to define the current balancing loop in a single paragraph, identify the weakest step in that communication loop, and upgrade it by just one notch.
The micro-standard examples here are brilliant because they are so unobtrusive. Like adding a short hypothesis to a balance change.
Yes.
Instead of an engineer just changing a variable from 1.0 to 1.2 in the code, they are required to write one sentence in the commit log. We expect this momentum increase to reduce early game frustration on gap jumps. Just that one sentence.
Or adding a single defined observation metric before you run a playtest so you know what you're actually looking for.
Right. But the most controversial micro-standard, I think, is adding a stop condition, defining exactly when the team will accept the balance of a mechanic and forcefully move on to the next task.
So what does this all mean? It forces intentionality into a process that historically relies entirely on gut instinct. When you state a hypothesis, we expect this to reduce frustration, you are setting a measurable benchmark for success.
It keeps the iteration honest.
Exactly. If the playtesters are still frustrated, the hypothesis failed, and you revert.
But let me channel every creative director listening right now.
Sure.
Does putting a rigid stop condition on design iteration kill the magic? I mean, aren't the absolute greatest games in history the ones that are tweaked, polished, and obsessively iterated upon until the very last possible second before the discs are printed?
It is a deeply romantic idea, but the source, and frankly the history of canceled projects, proves otherwise. Without a stop condition, you don't magically stumble into perfection. You stumble into endless, aimless tuning.
Yeah.
You get trapped in an infinite loop, redesigning the exact same weapon stats until you have completely lost the thread of the original game design. A stop condition doesn't mean you settle for a terrible jump mechanic. It means the team collectively agrees on what good enough to test in the wider game looks like.
Right.
It forces you to zoom out and evaluate the forest rather than spending 4 years infinitely redesigning a single leaf.
You can't evaluate the pacing of the entire game if you are still endlessly tweaking the speed of the run cycle in level 1.
Exactly.
That makes total sense. So we've covered the entire pipeline. We've hijacked the retro meetings to force accountability. We've killed the massive wikis by installing micro standards right where the work happens. We've pulled risks out of the basement by asking what breaks when things slip.
Yeah.
And we've tamed the endless churn of creative drift with hypotheses and stop conditions. The blueprint is complete. But if you, the learner, are listening to this on your commute right now and you want to deploy this methodology tomorrow morning, well, the source provides an exact step-by-step roadmap to ensure you don't immediately crash and burn.
It outlines what it calls the 2-week pilot. And the text is acutely aware of the irony of introducing a new system to prevent the failure of new systems.
It's a bit of a paradox.
It is. It knows that introducing Kaizen can very easily feel like introducing just another burdensome management program, which is the exact opposite of the goal. So it prescribes a highly constrained, almost stubbornly small pilot phase.
Week 1 is incredibly simple. You run a short retro using the keep, drop, try, learn format. Out of that meeting, you pick one single improvement to try for the next week.
Yeah.
You assign an owner. You set a check-back date for exactly 1 week later, and you implement the tweak. That is the entirety of week 1.
And in week 2, you hold the check-back meeting and review the result based on your learn metric. Did it help? If yes, you keep it.
Simple.
If it didn't do anything, or if it made things worse, you ruthlessly drop it and replace it with a new experiment. If you decide to keep it, you cement it by writing it down as a micro standard, adding a sentence to a ticket template or a checklist.
The absolute golden rule of this pilot, printed in bold, is do not introduce more than 3 improvements at once under any circumstances.
Ideally, you just do one.
Just one. And the psychological key to getting your team to buy into this is choosing a first improvement that removed a localized pain point immediately. The text explicitly states the team should feel relief, not overhead.
That is the crux of human adoption. If the first Kaizen unit you run requires everyone to fill out a new form for 3 weeks before they see a benefit, the team will instantly reject the entire philosophy.
They'll hate it.
They will accurately view it as just another management fad wasting their time. But if your first Kaizen unit immediately stops the QA department from sending back the same annoying bug report every afternoon, the team feels an instant shot of dopamine.
Relief builds buy-in.
Exactly. Once they feel the relief, they will trust the system enough to try a slightly bigger improvement next week.
But even with a pilot this simple, humans are incredibly good at finding ways to mess it up.
Always.
The document outlines the most common failure modes. The first is too many improvements. A team gets excited, they read the document, they run a retro, and they generate a laundry list of 15 brilliant fixes.
Right.
The result? They overwhelm themselves, cognitive load spikes, and nothing gets done. The fix is discipline. Reduce the scope to 1.
Yes.
The second failure mode is no owner. Everyone in the retro energetically agrees that a new handoff template is a fantastic idea, but nobody actually takes responsibility for creating it.
Right, and as we discussed earlier, assigning the improvement as a trackable feature completely fixes the no-owner problem.
Exactly.
The third failure mode is critical. No checkback date. The text contains a fascinating warning here. It says, without a scheduled review moment, improvements just become folklore.
Let me explore that word, folklore. Because in a lot of creative industries, folklore is actually seen as a positive thing.
Right.
Isn't folklore just a sign of a strong, healthy studio culture?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the unwritten rules of the elders, this is how we do things around here, this is our unique studio DNA.
Well, a healthy culture absolutely relies on shared values. But if we connect this back to the chaos described at the beginning of the document, unverified folklore in a highly stressed production system is exactly what leads to the fatal fixes living in memory problem.
Oh, okay.
Relying on folklore is incredibly fragile. If the entire process of how to safely compile a build of the game relies on the unwritten knowledge in the head of a senior engineer named Mark.
What happens when Mark takes a 2-week vacation? Or worse, quits?
Exactly. The folklore leaves the building with him. The new hires don't know the unwritten rules. They compile the build wrong, and the servers crash. A checkback date forces the team to verify if the rule works, and then document it as a microstandard. It moves the knowledge from fragile human folklore into resilient system memory.
It's right back to the airplane nosediving. You can't rely on oral history when the cabin is on fire and half the crew just parachuted out.
No.
You need the checklist right next to the controls. The final failure mode the text warns about is ceremony without output.
This is a big one.
If a team goes through the motions of a retro, but it produces absolutely no implemented change in the following week, you are actively training your team to disengage from the process. It's like standing at a crosswalk and repeatedly mashing the pedestrian button when you already know the machine is broken.
Yeah.
Eventually, you realize pushing the button does absolutely nothing to stop the cars. So you stop pushing it, and you just start jaywalking into traffic. You completely bypass the safety system because the system proved it doesn't work.
That is a perfect analogy. If the retro doesn't produce tangible relief, the team learns that speaking up is pointless. Enforcing that one tangible, shipped outcome protects the integrity of the entire Kaizen loop.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, digging into the mechanics of why things fail and how tiny changes save them. Let's synthesize this journey.
Sounds good.
We started by completely deconstructing the illusion of grand process changes, those massive, exhausting new operating models that act like a complicated gym machine turning into a clothing rack the minute the team gets stressed.
Right.
We defined the Kaizen unit as one single, highly focused, hyper-localized upgrade per cycle. We explored how to hijack the meetings you already have on your calendar to avoid schedule bloat, specifically using the keep, drop, try, learn format to fix the leaky roof of the retro.
And we detailed how to replace massive, utterly ignored wiki documentation with micro-standards that lives exactly where the work is happening.
Like that 5-point checklist at the top of a task ticket?
Just exactly. We brought hidden dependencies and theoretical risks out of the dark and into the light with living risk logs that ask, if this slips, what breaks?
Yeah.
And we brought measurable structure to the perceived magic of creative design by defining balancing loops, requiring hypotheses, and enforcing stop conditions to prevent endless drift.
And we wrapped it all in the safety of a 2-week pilot program that is strictly designed to deliver immediate dopamine-inducing relief rather than bureaucratic overhead.
Yeah.
The source document leaves us with an incredibly powerful, sobering closing thought.
It does.
It notes that studios, and frankly businesses in any sector, are always waiting for a calm period to finally sit down and improve how they work. But let's be entirely real in game development, or any fast-paced, high-stakes industry. That calm period rarely, if ever, arrives. The storm doesn't stop.
Kaizen is the profound realization that you cannot afford to wait for the storm to pass. It is a methodology specifically, meticulously designed to allow you to incrementally improve the ship's engine while you are still actively navigating the hurricane.
Right.
You are building the parachute on the way down, but you are doing it one perfectly stitched, stress-tested seam at a time, rather than trying to invent a new fabric in freefall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to you, the learner, let's connect this entire philosophy right back to your daily life. Why is this specific document so vital for you? Because this is the ultimate weapon against information and process overload.
Yeah.
This document is giving you official, verified permission to look at 99% of the broken, annoying, chaotic things in your workflow tomorrow and completely ignore them.
Just ignore them.
It is permission to obsess over isolating and fixing just one highly specific, incredibly small friction point for this week. It is the permission to be radically small in your ambition so you can be massive and consistent in your execution.
And the document ends with a very direct, challenging prompt for the reader. It asks, what would you fix first in your production loop if you had to choose one improvement that fits into a single week?
It's a great mechanical question from the source. But building on the psychology of everything we've unpacked today, I want to leave you with a deeper, entirely unmentioned implication to mull over before we sign off.
Okay.
If Kaizen truly relies on identifying daily frictions and pain points to feed its improvement loop, well, it means that the things that annoy you the most at work tomorrow aren't actually problems anymore.
Oh, wow.
They aren't things to dread. They are just the raw data you need for your first Kaizen unit. The worse the fiction, the better the data. Does that change how you feel about walking into your next deeply frustrating, incredibly chaotic meeting?
It provides a completely different lens on workplace stress. It turns you from a victim of chaos into an active systems designer.
It really is a superpower. Thank you for handing over such a stellar, practical piece of source material for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious. Don't try to fix the whole house while it's burning, and maybe go find that one small upgrade for your week.
If this is useful, subscribe.
New breakdowns every week.